Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday. You can also catch him as the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. And you can also catch him on the draft show twice a week, me as well, both of us on DallasCowboys.com. When I don't have sales meetings or other things that preclude me from coming. But Brian, how you doing today?
Robert, I'm doing very well. I was in a hit and run accident last night.
You were?
Yeah, hit and run.
This is not theater here, guys.
No.
Did not know that. What happened?
I cannot leave our building over here on Central Expressway without having something happen.
So why did you flee the scene?
Why did I flee the scene?
You were the victim of a hit and run. Got it. Okay, sorry.
Real quick, if I can, I don't. People have problems. This is the least. Trust me, there's folks that have a lot more problems. I've had my truck stolen from this building, and I was involved in a hit and run, literally 500 yards from the front door of this building. Last night, I was going down McKinney, and a guy ran the stop sign, went right into the front left of my car, which is basically brand new. So,
is it totaled?
No, I drove it. I was able to drive it. I drove it to the repair place today, but we just don't have a lot of parts in the world now, because of the pandemic. So yeah. I'm driving a renter car. There's a lot more problems in the world, but it's just unfortunate. I was able to get the license plates. I took a picture of the guy's license plate as he's driving away, and I had it. So, unfortunately, this gentleman, I don't think was from here, because I had a conversation with him, very one-sided, and then
he just left.
He was talking to somebody on the phone, and they made a determination that you probably need to get out of there. He hit me in a Suburban. He had a Suburban with a trailer on the back. And so, yeah.
Do you want to just give out his license plate right now to everyone who's listening?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to let the Dallas Police Department handle that one. But, yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Well, maybe after the Fox 4 shows a picture of the Suburban a month after the crime, the Dallas police will catch him, just like they did with the Kelvin Joseph situation. So, that's good. Best of luck to you on that, Brian.
Thank you. It'll be all right. Everything's fine. Like I say, it's good to be with everybody. Let's talk some Cowboys football. Let's talk some draft. Let's talk some whatever you want to talk about, Bobby. And whatever.
Do you want to talk about Kelly Kapowski on my shirt from Saved by the Bell?
Did she come into studio today, or is she coming?
No, she didn't. I'm just I love this shirt. It's an old Kapowski shirt, but we actually have Cowboys content to talk about. I didn't mean
to bring everybody down with my.
No, it was good.
I can't catch a break with autos leaving this radio facility. That's my problem.
It's a bad omen. It's a bad omen, bro.
Bad omen, yeah.
This is the dead period for the Cowboys.
It is.
February 17th about now. You're a few weeks out from their last playoff game. So there's not really any storylines we can still carry out of there. We've probably already kicked off a couple of the, hey, what are they going to do this offseason type questions?
Yeah.
Knock those out. And you're still a couple weeks away from the combine, being able to react to that, a couple weeks away from the draft. Like, this really is around here. Mid-February is probably the deadest it'll be on Cowboys talk. But we are saved because Jory Epstein from Yahoo Sports cornered Dak Prescott at the Super Bowl, and she held on to the article until today. Or until Wednesday when she dropped it. And so we have fresh Dak Prescott quotes on the Cowboys offense, Brian. Mm-hmm. And from what we were talking about earlier, I don't think you've seen these yet. So this will be,
I haven't. Yeah, I've been working fresh. I've been doing stuff all morning other than what I'm supposed to be doing. How about that?
I'll get fresh Brian Broaddus reaction here. So this is Jory's article at Yahoo Sports. Jory, by the way, one of the best on the beat.
She's best friends with Dak too, by the way.
Oh, she's got a good relationship with Dak.
She and Dak are very, very close. Very close.
She and Dak are good. And so Jory's headline is, how much will Cowboys offense change under Mike McCarthy? Dak Prescott weighs in. And so the central question she had here after catching up with them at Super Bowl was, how much will the Cowboys system change as head coach Mike McCarthy takes over play calling? And Dak said, right now, Mike told me about 20-30% change. I think, if anything, it's things that need to be changed. It's great to dial in, fix some things, get sharper and crisper. I'm excited. So there's a couple other quotes, and we'll kind of go down the list of other things that he had to say. But right off the bat, when you hear 20 to 30% change, if McCarthy has said something like that to Dak, and Dak has relayed that, what is 20 to 30%? That sounds, does that mean like, hey, we're going to change our language, so the language makes up 20 to 30% of it? Or is it, we're going to throw out 20 to 30% of what's typically been in the game plan? If you were to hear something like that, do you think that's just a BS number they're throwing out, a BS estimate, or do you think that is indicative of you're going to see some moderate changes? It's not going to be a complete overhaul, but there will be some moderate changes.
I kind of feel like that it is, I want to say kind of a BS number. And I say a BS number because you don't know until you sit down and start to go through your roster and what you have, what you don't have, how you're going to line up front, what running backs are you going to have? Are you going to have both running backs here? Are you going to have one running back here? Are you going to draft a receiver? Are you going to draft a tight end? There's a lot of things that are kind of going into this. I think some of the changes he needs to think about is maybe Mike McCarthy doesn't like the option route stuff. Dak was talking about, no, I want to keep the option route stuff in. That's probably a discussion that Dak and Mike are going to have going forward, or the way that Mike's going to call those particular routes. I think Mike needs to figure out how to get the screen game going much better here. It's non-existent. You talk about changes that need to be made. Teams are doing a great job of getting backs in space with screen packages. They're getting tight ends in space with screen packages. But I don't know if Mike can throw a number on it like 20 or 30%. I kind of feel like Dak is being really, really good to try to say there's going to be change. There could be 100% change, but I think it's all about personnel groups. When they sit down and look at the cut-ups, what were they really, really good at? What were they really bad at? And then they need to implement a better job with their screen packages.
On the screen packages, what coaches are you like? I mean, obviously Mike McCarthy, Brian Schottenheimer, they're going to be involved in that. But are you also, I guess, pulling in Mike Solari, whoever running backs coaches? Where would you look for? Is there a specific position group where you'd look for help from that? Like, would Solari be the main coach you'd be trying to work with? Like, hey, how do we fix this screen game? Or is that more a thing you'd ask from like the backs coaches and things?
I think and I'm not just trying to give you a blanket answer here, but I really do believe that everybody needs to sit in that room, and Mike needs to delegate. All right, who are the best screen teams in the National Football League? Who are the best screen teams in college football? Let's look at analytics here. I know I'm focusing on screen stuff and all that, but teams are using this as a weapon. And the Cowboys, it's just non-existent. Tight end screens, running back screens, just non-existent. And so one of the point of emphasis that I would do if I was Mike McCarthy is I would say, okay, everybody sit down and let's come up with some ideas of how we're going to implement a better screen game, or a better, if you want to call it, deceptives game, whether it's counter runs or, motion, stuff like that. I would challenge my coaches during this dead period that you're talking about, Bobby, to, before we get really cracking on this draft, is to let's steal some ideas from some people. Let's watch Kansas City screen package. Let's watch Philadelphia screen package. Let's watch Jacksonville screen package. Let's get some ideas that we can maybe steal from. And it's going to be up to Mike Solari to say, okay, we've got offensive linemen that can do this. We've got backs that can do this. But until you completely really know who you have personnel-wise, it's just like, I really like these ideas. And to be a part of it, to make it part of what we're doing, we're going to have these kinds of players. I think that's something that you clearly, you self-evaluate, you self-scout, and then you kind of figure out, okay, these are things we want to do. Do we have the personnel to do it? These coaches have got to come up to speed. Schottenheimer has been here, but Solari hasn't. he's got to come up to speed of watching all this tape and kind of sitting down and seeing what he has with these offensive linemen.
You know, when you mentioned the coaches that need to sit in on this meeting, we don't have a quarterbacks coach named. I think in all likelihood that will be Scott Tolzien eventually. They have not named a running backs coach. So we're still kind of waiting around for two parts there. Now, before we jump back into the comments, as I mentioned, don't have a quarterbacks coach yet. It's expected to be Tolzien. And then I think replacing Tolzien as the assistant offensive coach with a focus on quarterbacks is probably that hire they made this week, Will Harriger from USC, who had spent several years in Seattle with Russell Wilson, working with him and Brian Schottenheimer there. Dan Quinn hired him in Atlanta to do some work. He was Trevor Lawrence's quarterback coach in 2021. But Will Harriger, another guy, as we kind of briefly dovetail real quick, Harriger, a guy who at USC gets a lot of credit when you talk to people for being hands-on and working with Caleb Williams, who showed a lot of growth as a sophomore in 2022. Did you hear what did you hear when talking to people about Harriger?
Yeah, I asked a bunch of people around the league, and they were all saying really, really bright, really smart, hard worker. They said the guy actually has a really good eye for evaluation of for the draft and for free agency and things like that. So my buddies who are general managers that know him felt like that, man, this guy can not only help you as a coach, but he could also help you as an evaluator. And so I think that's a real positive as well.
Now, back to what Dak had to say at Super Bowl. We talked about the 20-30% change, but we're breaking down a lot for just a single answer here. But he says, I think if anything, it's things that need to be changed. What do you think Dak's talking about? I mean, we're asking to get into his head a little bit, but that sounds almost like Dak had some issues with the offense last year.
Yeah, I think he did. I think that, to me, I think that not only did Dak have some issues with the offense, I think the coaches had some issues with Dak, and I think it really was a two-way street. I think there's some things that they wanted to do, and maybe they felt like that they were a little bit handicapped from doing it, whether it was personnel, whether it was fear of mistake, whether it was the fear of actually reading the defenses and kind of understanding, okay, I need to go here with the ball. I really do think this was a two-way street. I don't think that, when you look at Kellen Moore, I kind of feel like that if you sat down and had a beer with him right now, he would probably tell you, hey, this is what I really, really didn't like about working with Dak. Everybody up front is talking about, oh, it's mutual, we're good. That's, but there's probably Kellen Moore's probably saying, hey, I couldn't do this with him, or I couldn't do that. And then on the flip side, you sit down and have a beer with Dak. He's like, well, when Kellen would call this, there's no way we could do this. I mean, he's asking me to do something that we just couldn't do. Didn't have the personnel, it wasn't the right time, So I think that there was a little bit when you get a parting of the ways, and especially as successful as this offense was with points and yards and stuff like that, rankings, man, there had to be something super, super, super wrong for them and maybe the head coach had a problem with Kellen Moore, and maybe the head coach agreed with Dak Prescott that, hey, we're trying to do something that we're not capable of doing. And, and Kellen's like, well, damn, we're one of the best offenses in the league. We score points. We could probably be even better if you guys would just allow me to do this. So there was clearly something wrong on both sides here.
Yeah, and I think, look, we've talked before, there was tension with Kellen Moore and Mike McCarthy for almost the entire time they were there together. To be honest, and look, this is to be expected. I talked about this on 105 Through the Fan on Friday morning. And Brian, I'm sure we've not talked about it a lot because, I think it's in the past. It's not relevant. But I'm sure you heard some of the same things. 2020 was not, even before he got hurt, was not the easiest transition. There's natural tension that builds up when you've got a new head coach and a quarterback. And I think over time they've grown better and grown close to each other. And now things are great. But I think the in general, Kellen Moore trying to incorporate his own ideas, the ideas that Scott Linehan had that he probably picked up from him, that from Jason Garrett, and then the stuff Mike wanted to include in the West Coast offense, probably frustrating for Kellen Moore to create an offense that he felt was a bit of a hodgepodge and less just singularly what he wanted to do. And for Dak, I'm sure my thought of that when he said some things that need to be changed, I think Dak would rather say, give me Mike McCarthy's West Coast system or give me Kellen Moore and whatever system he wants to run. Don't give me this, it's why Kurt Warner and guys talk about it doesn't look like a coherent, scheme when you watch them play offense out there. And so I think it's because it is such a mix of just a variety of different things. So it's probably best to just commit to let Kellen run the offense he wants or let Mike McCarthy run the offense he wants. But this blend really wasn't working out anymore.
Yeah.
Relationship. Dak Prescott said, when you lose a friend, you're going to be upset, but that's the nature of this business. When I say I'm upset he's gone, it's not that I'm upset about the future. It's that when you're a player, you have a relationship you have the relationship we've had when he was a player. I watched his success and watched him grow into the coordinator that he is. I'm just as excited about our opportunity as I am for a new start for Kellen. There is zero doubt at this point, I think, from what we've heard from both sides, because I know there was a question earlier like, oh, Kellen Moore got fired. The more you hear people talk about it, and it's there in Dak's quote there, this was 100% mutual, Kellen Moore and the Cowboys splitting.
Yeah, it had to happen. It had to happen. It really, really. I think that, to me, Dak is, Dak is here. They've committed to him. They've committed to trying to, do what's best for him. And moving on from Kellen Moore, Mike McCarthy felt like obviously that moving on from him or moving on from Kellen would probably be the best thing for Dak. So, that's kind of where all this is at right now, with that. And and I'm okay with that. If Mike makes that decision that they're going to be better off with him calling the plays, then you know what? And it's going to help Dak. I am all for that. Something had to be done. And I think they did the right thing here. I really do.
Last quote here from Dak Prescott in the article with Jory Epstein from Yahoo Sports. He says, sometimes change is good. I'm a big believer in change, and I'm excited for Mike calling the plays. I'm excited for Schotty. That's Brian Schottenheimer. I'm excited for just being able to dial into this offense and just really get it to where we want it to be. I'm excited as hell. Is there a little bit of Dak quarterback speak there, Brian, or do you think that that's his legitimate feeling on it?
I think there's sometimes some quarterback speak there, but I also feel like though that this is like I said, this is something that needed to be done. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Mike McCarthy handles Dak Prescott. I'm looking forward to seeing how Brian Schottenheimer handles Dak Prescott. I really do. I've heard nothing but positive things about Brian Schottenheimer coming from defensive players, talking about, what they believe Brian Schottenheimer, how he can help. So if guys are buying into Brian Schottenheimer, well, then, if Dak Prescott buys into him as well, I kind of feel like that's something that is going to be good going forward.
You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, you and I are both big fans of the draft. By the way, got some Tulane offense in, Brian. We're going to
How about that? Yeah.
Running back Sharp. Just got the Georgia offense in. So we're loaded and ready to go. How deep are you in on players at this point?
Probably about 140, 100,
Look at that.
145. Yeah.
All right. So I'm like 100 behind you, Brian. But I run through these. I can knock out 4 in a night. I'll get caught up like that. We're gonna go fast here, Brian. I can do even more than that. But as we look at this draft now, you and I are gonna talk a lot about this. I'm gonna be in Indy at the end of the month or beginning of next month, and be able to conduct a few meetings. Hopefully, get some good insight there. I'll start, talking to contacts here, get thoughts about what everybody thinks about these guys. But as we open up in the draft, the Cowboys are picking 26th. Let's just kind of look at this broadly a little bit. We're just going to talk generally about the NFL draft for this segment and what's loaded up here. When you look at this draft, where is it deepest, do you think?
You're going to make me look. You're going to make me pull up my board for what I've got so far right now.
After you turn off your watch, I'll make you pull up.
I just hit the button. I just hit the button on that watch.
As you look that up, I will say I think there's a lot of really good edge players in this draft.
No, like I said, I am trying to get my computer to pop up.
If you talk depth, a lot of edge. If you talk maybe a little top heavier, still decent depth. But I think at the top, there's a lot of really good corners.
Yeah. I like I said, I put together my board last night and I didn't pull it up. Now it's like when your computer needs to fire up and it doesn't fire up. When All right, here we go. Right now I have 20 players with first round grades, and so player 21 on back would be considered second round players. I kind of feel like, though, if you look at the quality of the players there's good names at wide receiver.
That's a deeper position for you, though, right? Not top heavy.
It's not top heavy. If you're talking about top heavy, for me, I would think that the cornerback spot would be the most top heavy position, and then the edge would be the next. Where I have the biggest gaps are at linebacker, and I have a little bit of a gap at the top of the board. I've got several like second round centers and several second round one techniques. But that if you look at just quality throughout the whole round of 1, 2, 3, 4 for what I have so far, it's all the cornerbacks. It's every one of them is the cornerbacks. So that's kind of where we're at right now. As far as my boards, I think there's a little bit of some depth at offensive tackle, especially early. And then there's a couple of guys there in the second round, and then it kind of goes off into the third round as well. So defensively, it would be, well, let's do this. Wide receiver, tight end, offensive tackle, edge, and then cornerbacks would be where I'm at.
I look at that's where it's deep right there for you. Is the thinnest position. And I know a lot of times people like to couple guard and center together as interior offensive linemen, but it feels like there's a big drop off with guard.
Yeah.
I mean, people like Osiris Torrance from Florida in the first round. I know, but man, I think when you look at guard this year, it's like, if you really want one, it's kind of Torrance at the beginning, and then there's a drop. I mean, there's Avila from TCU, there's Voorhees from USC. Like, you got a couple other guys that you can look at, but it's not very rich at the top for guards if that's what you want. And the Cowboys, they may need a guard if they move on from Connor McGovern.
Yeah, but that's the thing about it is it going to be the guy that's the converted tackle that's playing guard? I mean, we talk about Torrance from Florida, talk about Avila from TCU. Those guys are kind of like, those are like guys that are like guards. And now when you go down in that round, McClendon, McFadden, those players are a little bit further down the board. But like I say, there's a really big drop between those like top two guys to where you're at now at that position.
Now, when you look at, when I say it's kind of Torrance and then down, you're right in terms of, okay, how do you view guys? I'll tell you somebody that I absolutely love, and I know just from the way we had spoken yesterday about this guy, Peter Skoronski at Northwestern.
Yeah,
I know. So it depends if you have him in as a guard. I wouldn't play with him. I'd put him at tackle. That's a guy who actually got to Northwestern as a center. So that's a guy with center background who played really, really well at tackle. And some people want to put inside a guard. I know our buddy Dane Brugler. He has Skoronski as a guard. But for me, I look at this as the Rashawn Slater question all over again. And to me, if you were to get Skoronski, he'd be right there. Now, if the Cowboys, they're not going to pick Skoronski. Skoronski's going in the top 10, and Dallas is not picking there. But if Dallas were to get somebody like that, let's do this for fun, just as a fun little exercise for you, Brian. Dallas picks Skoronski. Which guy are you playing at tackle and which are you playing at guard between Tyler Smith and Peter Skoronski?
I have Skoronski rated as an offensive tackle. I don't have him as a guard, so I'd put.
But you have Tyler as a tackle too, don't you?
I would put Tyler Smith at guard, and I would put Skoronski at tackle. To me, I like Skoronski, and I think everybody makes a big deal about like the short arms and stuff like that. But I think he can play tackle just fine. I don't have a problem with him, and this team was up until the time that Tyron Smith got hurt was looking at Tyler Smith as a guard. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's to me, at least now that Tyler Smith can play tackle, you might do the same thing with Skoronski. You might put him at guard. But I've seen I don't know. I've seen both these guys. I've seen Tyler Smith play tackle in this league. You're absolutely right. You might just take that kid and move him, Skoronski, the Northwestern offensive tackle, and you might move him to guard.
Have we, you know how you've always said, back when you were in your scouting days, there's no chance you're ever you're never drafting Kyler Murray number 1 back when you were a scout. Nobody's ever drafting Baker Mayfield number 1. You talked about similarly a guy like Zay Flowers, the receiver at Boston College. That's a guy that would have been written off back in your days. And I know you're a big fan of Zay Flowers. But when you look at that, do you think the next thing to sort of get knocked down a little bit might be arm length at tackle?
Yeah, I mean, people are very critical about arm length because they're saying these rushers, if you can't keep these rushers off you, if you can't get your hands inside and they're grabbing your shoulder and pulling around you, or they're bullying you and getting you off balance and all that, that's where arm length is.
Sure.
It's like cornerbacks. If you got a short arm corner, they always make a big deal about wingspan, length, and all that stuff like that. Because if you're trying to hit knock the ball away from a receiver and you keep hitting him in the wrist and not getting the ball, is that your arm length? Is that a problem? Is that keeping you from doing things? Sure, it is. So I just kind of feel like that. To me, I'm in that mode of if guys could play, they could play. They figure out how to play without arm length. Skoronski has figured out how to play tackle at a very high level without his arm length. And he's not playing it like some small division. He's playing against legitimate pass rushers every weekend, and he's doing just fine. So, I mean, in the NFL, we've seen short arm guys have some success as long as their feet are good, and as long as they have power and they're able to play that way.
Yeah, and see that's what made me a little bit curious about it in terms of just if that would be the next one to go down a little bit. Like, for instance, a lot of people like Jonah Williams when he came out of Bama and he's played for the Bengals. Shorter arms. Joe Staley, shorter arms. Rashawn Slater, shorter arms. Who are some of the other ones that we've had in recent years? Isaiah Wynn, who he got hurt, but he was a good player before that. Taylor Lewan's a guy who has under 34-inch arms. So do you think do you think that idea is going to be slow to change though? Because I feel like this team, for instance, this Cowboys team, I don't think will ever let somebody with under threshold arms play tackle, regardless of how good their feet are. Now, Zach Martin, I think, was 32 7/8.
Yeah.
And they've been comfortable with him playing tackle before, but he's obviously a Hall of Famer. But do you think that teams will ever be moved off of that? Or do you think it's going to have to be, nope, you're just going to have to always prove them wrong, and that Skoronski will have to fight that?
I think it's something that he's probably always going to teams are weird about this stuff. Like I said, 20 years ago, you'd have never drafted Baker Mayfield or Kyler Murray in the first overall pick. You wouldn't have done that. You just wouldn't do that. There are things that Flowers, the 5'9" receiver. There's several receivers that are really good in this draft. Washington, the kid from Penn State, he's 5'10". There's short receivers in this draft. Let me just tell you, there's guys in this league that are making plays every single day that have some deficiency to them. You have to figure it out. There's a reason why Skoronski is the number 1 tackle in this draft, maybe the number 1 offensive lineman in this draft, because he's a damn good player. Now, if you want to ding him for short arms and not like him and all that, well, then by all means, go for it. But you'll be playing against the guy, and he'll be blocking your long-armed defensive end, and keeping him from getting any sacks in the game.
When you were evaluating, and even maybe still today, let's say, is there a threshold that you still would follow? Like, if you were in a draft room today, is there a threshold that you would fight for? Like, hey, I don't want a defensive end with arms this length. I need my receiver to have this 40 time. Like, is there a trait that you go, this is a threshold for me that I can't break?
I think the thing that bothers me the most, especially watching the way that football is played today, I don't think you can have heavy-footed or slow offensive linemen. I just don't. I think the athletes are too good in this game. At defensive tackle, at edge. I think you have to get up on the second level and block. I think you have to be able to adjust to twists. I think you have to be able to pick up blitzes. I don't think you could be heavy-footed and play offensive line in this league. I just don't. That's something those are the problems that I have when I look at guys like a Torrance, because I think Torrance at 347 pounds looks slow-footed. He does it. I mean, if you're a tick late against a lot of these defensive linemen, you are going to lose. And I like Torrance, but I don't like him at 347 pounds, the Florida guard. I would much rather him be, if he could get to 327, 320, something like that, I think he would be a better player. But if you're going to play at 350 and your feet are going to be questionable, I don't think I can live with that. I really, really don't.
What so when it comes to footwork and slow footedness and stuff like that, is there a specific? Is it just a workout drill you would look for? Is there a testing number, like with 3-cone?
Watch the
change of direction, but
watch the shuttles, watch the 3-cone, watch any drills they put these guys through at the combine where they have to laterally slide or kick away from the line of scrimmage. They do that one drill where tackles, they'll kick from the line of scrimmage and they have to cut off the rusher from the outside. If you're seeing a guy that is late getting over there, that's a red flag to me. If you can't get out of your stance, the one saving grace that Terrence Steele has, because he's not strong, he's got like outstanding feet. That helps. I mean, he does a great job of making you run over him to get to the ball. He might not be able to just blow you off the ball and control you and all that, but he could cut you off. He could reach you. He could position block. That's why you could be valuable. If you, I know 40-year-old Jason Peters, he was to the end, but if everything was just a simple dry block, he's golden. But when it turns into, we've got to reach and cut off, scoop, and you can't get your head across, and that defensive tackle is running down inside, there's no cutback lane or anything like that, you're no good. You're no good to the team there. You're really no good.
All right, I'm just gonna have some quick answers from you. I'm gonna give you a descriptor, and then you give me your answer off the top of your head, which player fits it. Okay.
All right.
Best route runner in the draft.
Smith and Jigba.
Best play strength on offensive line.
Probably Wright from Tennessee.
Best recovery speed at corner.
I would have to say, man, there's times when Ringo gets beat, but he can run it down. I would probably say Ringo from Georgia.
Best technician at edge rusher.
That would be probably Wilson from Texas Tech.
Yes, he's very good. I think we're going to have him in the 105 through the Fan Studios next week. I think he's going to come sit down with us. And finally, I know you haven't stacked it yet, but best player in the draft.
Man, I would say, I'm going to probably say it's Bijan Robinson.
Yes, there we go, Brian.
But see, everybody will put quarterbacks up there and stuff like that. I actually have Wilson, Texas Tech edge over Anderson on my board. I have Porter, corner, Penn State over Gonzalez from Oregon as the best corner in the draft. I have Robinson and Gibbs from Alabama as the two backs. And then you mentioned the only tight end I have in the first round is Meyer from Notre Dame. But these wide receivers. Now I like Musgrave. I got.
But you have a two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Musgrave, Washington from Georgia, Kincaid from Utah would be my guys there. But I think that when you look at like these guys, like I think that the wide receivers you mentioned, that Smith and Jigba, I think he's got a really good feel for how to run routes. I really, really do.
You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. Got a few questions that we can go through. First question here from @cool_Elway. Do you think they could double dip at a position this year? So they could always double dip over 7 rounds. So I assume you mean more like, let's say first 4 rounds. Do you think there's a chance they would take a position twice in the first 4 rounds?
I do not.
Zero chance. What would be the position they would most likely do it with?
I think the position that you would probably. How well do you feel about what's going on at? How good do you feel about running back if you get Pollard gone and you got if you have Pollard gone and you have Zeke gone? Would you take one early, then take one later in the draft? You know, like a 1 and you took one at 26 and then another like in the 5th round. You know,
especially if you feel like Malik Davis still has growing up to do.
You could do it at corner. You could probably take one in the first if you wanted at 26, and you could go all the way down to I believe it's Garrett Williams from Syracuse I have in the 4th round. I think he would be a great player to have because of his toughness and all that. That could be a double dip position for me.
Next question here from Luke Wells. Will Kevontae Turpin gain more of a role on offense this next year? His skill set is similar to that of Tyreek Hill. Kevontae Turpin did tell Blogging the Boys last week that he had his exit meeting and he communicated to them like, hey, I think I can do more. I think I can be somebody who, and he said his goal in training camp is going to be make it so they can't, they have no choice but to put me on the field.
Yeah.
I still think Kevontae Turpin's max is he's a 10 to 12 play gadget player. That's his very highest ceiling.
Maybe that's something that Kellen Moore just absolutely did not want to do. You know, there was also some times where he fumbled and muffed a couple of punts and stuff like that. So he had some big plays. Maybe the trust factor with Kellen Moore was not there. You know, I'd like to see that they would take opportunities in some of the preseason games. I know I think it was the last preseason game. I don't know if it's against the Texans or Jacksonville. Texans.
Yeah.
I think it was Texans. Texans. I think it was Texans. That they had a route where Rush overthrew him. They ran him out of bunch formation and they cleared the route and he was wide open. So I think it's more on Kellen Moore, and maybe now with Mike McCarthy, maybe with new staff, they'll come in and maybe Brian Schottenheimer will try and implement something that they've stole from somebody on tape.
Next question here from Danny. He's asking, are the Cowboys drafting a quarterback this year or next? I don't know if that's to replace Dak. I don't know if that's his inference. I think it probably is. I think Danny's not a big Dak Prescott fan. But just in general, let's say, what is the earliest, and I think you asked this on G-Bag the other day, what is the earliest I'm drafting a quarterback this year?
You know what? I kind of feel like, though, that to me, and I've looked at several of these quarterbacks already, and I know that Hendon Hooker from Tennessee is a guy that I kind of kept my eye on. I really want nothing to do with Tanner McKee from Stanford. I just don't think he's very good. But Hendon Hooker at 6'4", 218 pounds. This guy's a transfer from Virginia Tech. I know he hurt his ACL against South Carolina in November of in 20 of that. But this guy, you watch him play, he's a big, sturdy guy. He's got the ideal height and weight. He's accurate. He moves to avoid trouble. He has a feel for how to escape. He glides as a runner. I mean, he appears like he's kind of moving slow, but he's really kind of covering some ground. It's amazing how open the Tennessee receivers are on these games.
Yeah.
But he holds the ball to the very last moment and then lets that thing fly. But I think he's got a really talented group of wide receiver. I think it's extremely tough. I think that I have Hendon Hooker in the 4th round. I wouldn't be surprised if he went in the 3rd round. I think he's a really, really, really good player. I think people, whoever gets him is going to get a guy. I don't think that he doesn't get rattled at all. He plays really well in clutch moments of games. So I think that you could see a guy like that be a selection for the Cowboys, especially if they get that extra compensatory 4. Right now, talking to people over there, they've seen a couple different models where they thought it was 5.56 what they were going to get, but they believe they're looking at 4.56. So you pick up that extra 4, you could do a lot of good with that.
I have not seen this guy yet. He's on my list because somebody recommended that I check him out, and so I don't have a feel for this guy yet. I don't know if you've seen him. Have you seen Jaron Hall yet, the quarterback from BYU?
No, not yet. Not
Okay,
yet.
Jaron Hall is somebody that I need because I've just heard like, hey, really precise, really accurate. If you're talking about, perfect timing and needing to be really on point with some of these West Coast concepts, that might be a guy that is of some interest if you're looking at a later round quarterback. But I agree, if a Hendon Hooker is there at the right time, I think they could absolutely take something like that. Question here from John asking about any word on quarterback and running back coach. Quarterback coach, again, I think is likely to be Scott Tolzien. Brian, have you heard any chatter on the running back coach? I've had nothing ever since viewed those couple guys for offensive coordinator. Is it like them to drag this long, especially with Combine coming up?
Yeah, I think they might be. I'm not saying they're waiting on a guy, but I think this is kind of an important hire because they've got to figure out what they're going to do at the running back position. So to me, I think that they're going to kind of figure out what they're going to do at running back, and then the hire is going to come from that. There's some guys off these staffs that have been released that you might take an opportunity to look at. I just, to me, I think it's one of those things. That's a position. I think they got the offensive line coach first. That's really the most important position. I think that they can take a little bit more time on this running back coach.
Here's a fun question. This sounds like Brian brought a special here. This is the kind of question that if somebody asked you this on the draft show, I think you'd get a big smile on your face and go, "Oh, I like this," just because it's a fun out of the box thought. This is from DCU. Are we sure Jalen Hyatt is the best receiver coming out of Tennessee?
I think he is myself.
I think he is too, but Cedric Tillman's good.
Cedric Tillman's a really, really good player. But if you ask me to stack where I have Hyatt in the first round and I have Tillman in the third. That's just the way. My top three wide receivers on my board as they sit, Addison, Hyatt, and Johnston are my top three receivers on my board. Second round, Smith and Jigba from Ohio State, Downs from North Carolina, Boutte from LSU, and then Scott from Cincinnati. Those are my top 7 wide receivers right now.
If you were drafting specifically for the Cowboys, but I guess just in general, which would you rather have here in terms of your evaluation? Would you have would you prefer a receiver game-breaking speed like a guy like Hyatt has? Hyatt's he's going to run like a 3.7 in the 40.
Yeah.
He's got ridiculous speed. That, or would you rather have a guy who maybe doesn't have the best top-end speed, but the, competitive toughness and the ability to make, contested catches in traffic? Just basically the guy who can make those tight contested. I guess the question basically comes down to an X or a Z. Like which style receiver would you rather prefer for what the Cowboys are looking at?
I think the Cowboys need some speed on the outside. I think they do. I think, but now the offense might dictate them to have more bigger body guys, and if that's the case, then a guy like Rice from SMU, Boutte from LSU, those are bigger guys. Guy like Downs is a little bit of a shorter guy from North Carolina. Smith and Jigba is a little bit of a shorter guy, right at 6 foot. This is an interesting group of wide receivers because there's not those. The Addison, Hyatt, Johnston combination that I just gave you.
Yeah.
I don't think they would stack very well with what we've seen the last 3 years at wide receiver. I just don't. I don't think they would with the Lambs, Jefferson, Chase kind of combinations, those groups that we've seen. I don't think these guys would stack particularly well. I think those guys would be Addison, Hyatt, and Johnston would be below those names I just mentioned.
That does it for us here on the Love of the Star podcast, but we will be back with you guys again shortly. And if you have any questions throughout the week before we record, make sure to drop those for us. We love talking draft with you guys, and it's not going to be too long before Jerry's sitting on that bus in Indy, and we probably start hearing rumors about which way they're thinking about some of their own guys and some other potential free agents. There will be a lot to discuss with you guys over the coming months. Until next time, we'll see you guys later.